Hi, and welcome to week 5 of Leadership and Administration. I'm really excited about this week's session. I think you're going to enjoy it. It focuses on the leader and leadership mind and emotion, and this idea of the leader as an individual and how you as an individual, when you're leading, the person that you are impacts the way in which you lead, and some things that you need to think about as you process that. So we're going to look at our objectives, learning objectives. And number one, we want to help you understand the importance of self-awareness and also think about recognizing your blind spots. One of the most important avenues of leadership development today in the 21st century is this notion of self-awareness. Who am I? And in terms of who I am, how does that impact those who I am leading? What are my blind spots and how can I address those? We then are going to identify some major personality dimensions and understand how personality influences leadership and relationships within organizations. And we'll look at the Myers-Briggs training inventory and some other ideas around personality and how that affects your leadership capacity. Remember, leadership is about building relationships. Leaders influence, they don't control, and influence comes through relational strength. We also want to help you think about your values because that forms part of who you are. And so you're going to clarify your instrumental and end values and recognize how these impact your thoughts and behavior. We also want to help you define your attitudes and explain their relationship to leader behavior. And then we're going to, this week, explain attributions and recognize how perceptions affect leader-follower relationship. And that's very powerful. For many people, perceptions are reality. And then we want to recognize individual differences in cognitive style and also broaden your own thinking style to expand your leadership potential. So we want to think about how do you, in terms of your cognitive style, interact with the world. And then we want to help you understand how to lead and work with people with varied personality traits. So you might have this preferred personality style, someone else might have a different preferred personality style, and how is it that you then work together effectively to facilitate the accomplishment of a common goal or to facilitate the accomplishment of the vision. We also want to help you recognize how mental models guide your behavior and your relationships. And we looked at paradigms last week. This week we'll look at mental models, and the two are similar. We want to engage in independent thinking by staying mentally alert. That's really pivotal for good leadership. Thinking critically, and critical thinking is one of the World Economic Forum's number 2 key skills that leaders must have moving into Industry 4.0. Creative problem solving is number 1. Critical thinking and the capacity to think critically is number 2. And then we want to help you break out of categorized thinking patterns and open your mind to new ideas and multiple perspectives. Good leaders are able to open their minds to new ideas. You're not stuck in one form of thinking and in one paradigm. So we want to begin to apply systems thinking this week, and you'll think systemically. Leaders need to think systemically. As leaders act to lead, those actions have implications systemically in many ways. And we need to try to anticipate how our actions as leaders impact the system. We see this, of course, in our world today in terms of sustainability and flourishing, and how so many actions that leaders in the past have taken have led to undermining the strength of our environment and our existence. We want to help you exercise emotional intelligence, and that is one of the important dimensions of leadership development in the 21st century. We need to exercise emotional intelligence. How aware am I of my emotions, and how well do I self-regulate those emotions? And then socially, how do my emotions impact others? And then we want to look at theory X and theory Y and apply this difference of motivating others based on fear or motivating others based on love. And there's this whole new theory in leadership that is emerging, that leaders love the people they lead. Good leaders love the people they lead. They don't see people as a means to an end. They actually see people as the end in themselves. And you'll be able to tell great leaders because great leadership brings out the best in people, and people are always better because they've been led well. So We want to talk about leading with the head and the heart. Whole leaders use both head and heart. They use their heads for organizational issues. So when I'm dealing with budgeting, controlling, staffing, kind of those management issues, marketing, vision casting, we use our head. But when we're dealing with human issues as leaders, we need to use our hearts. We need to balance the cognitive, the rational, with the emotional and with empathy. Good leaders are very empathic individuals. So some of the current issues we need to think about is how do we give people a sense of meaning in their work? If we're going to lead with the head and the heart, we need to understand that people are passionate, not driven. And many, many people today want to understand the meaning of their work. How is the world going to be different or better because of what I have contributed? And you as a leader are someone who helps to make sense of that and drive that forward. We want to help employees feel valued and respected. That's one of the most important things a leader can do. Do you know the names of those whom you are leading? Do you know what they care about? Do you know their struggles, their victories, their hurts? As a leader, you want to help your employees feel valued and respected. And how are you going to communicate that value and respect? And then you want to also keep morale and motivation high. And I've worked with organizations where morale is low. And when you look at low morale and you begin to look at the indicators of why that morale is low, so often it comes back to leadership and how effective leadership is or is not. So let's define self-awareness as we think about what it means to be self-aware as a leader. Someone who is self-aware is conscious of the internal aspects of their nature. Someone who is self-aware is conscious of the internal aspects of their nature, such as their personality traits, their emotions, values, attitudes, and perceptions. As an MBTI practitioner, I am classified as an ENFJ. That means I'm an extrovert who's intuitive, who processes data through feeling, and I make judgments. I like to be decisive. And so having that awareness of kind of how I interact with the world as an extrovert, that I'm intuitive, that I like to see the big picture elements, that I process with feeling, that people and their emotions really matter to me when I'm making decisions, when I'm processing data, and that I am decisive. I like to make a judgment and move on. That's a self-awareness piece that helps me as a leader when I'm interacting with someone who might be an INTJ, an introvert, intuitive, thinker judgment, and how then do I interact with them in terms of who I am. So it's really, really important to be self-aware. And that's just one dimension of self-awareness. There are so many. And then there's this issue of blind spots that so many of us wrestle with and struggle with because we don't know what we don't know until circumstances or people point that out to us. So what is a blind spot? It's a characteristic or habit that you are not aware of or don't recognize as a problem, but which limits your effectiveness as a leader. It's really, really important. I heard the example, for instance, of a person who was an STJ. So they process data through thinking and judgment and sensing. And they thought, they'd taken on a new leadership role and they thought, I need to motivate my employees and get closer to them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to request their HR files and kind of go through and get to know them that way. Well, that's a blind spot. As a leader, if you want to get to know people, what's the best approach? Think about that. Certainly not going through their personnel files. All right, so the importance of self-awareness. Effective leaders know who they are and what they stand for. And I'm going to move ahead very quickly now because I want to get to this notion of beliefs, values, attitudes, and actions. If you had the chance, I would ask you to stop right now and just jot down on a piece of paper, what do you believe? What do you value? What do you stand for? What's important to you as an emerging leader, as someone who in the future will be a leader? The environment, equity, non-racism, inclusion, all those kinds of things. What is important to you as an emerging leader? Think about that. That allows people to know who you are and what they can expect from you, especially if you clearly articulate and live out those values as a leader. But this requires self-reflection and journaling. And I would encourage you to start journaling, bullet journal, or else just a normal journal, but journal and reflect on what decisions did I make today? Why did I make those decisions? What values drove those decisions? What angered me? What disturbed me? What concerned me? And begin to reflect on who you are as a leader or as a potential leader. Authoritarianism then, many people are not self-aware and they come to leadership with this notion of authoritarianism, which is the belief that power and status differences should exist in an organization. If you have an authoritarian mindset, you believe that you should have higher status and that power difference should exist in an organization. You have to be aware of that because that'll affect how you lead. Are you someone who has high authoritarianism, or are you someone who's more open and egalitarian in your leadership style? So I want to very quickly talk about values. These are the fundamental beliefs that an individual considers to be important. What do you consider to be important? What do you value? These are relatively stable over time, and they have an impact on your attitudes and behavior. I wonder if I could very quickly just draw for you this idea here that when we look at people, when we see people, we see their actions. But what we don't see is below the surface of, and this is, by the way, is an iceberg, that's the ocean. What we don't see is their beliefs, their values, their attitudes. Of course, we only see their actions. So let me give you a quick example, and then we have to end our session. I believe that exercise is good for human health. That's a belief I have. And I forged that belief over time through research, through experience, through people I've talked to. Because I believe that exercise is important for human health, I value running. And so my attitude toward running is very positive. But how do you know that I value running? Well, you see my actions. You see me one day out as you're driving around, you see me running. Quick example of a leader where this occurred. Hitler caused the German people to believe that Jewish people were non-people, that they were substandard. This then led to the German people devaluing a whole segment of the human race. Their attitude toward them was negative, and of course we know that that then led to horrendous actions. And that's happening all over the world today with different people groups because of the way in which their leadership changes their beliefs, values, attitudes, and actions. So I end with this last thought. As a leader, are you self-aware of what your beliefs, values, attitudes, and actions are? And as a leader or emerging leader, are you aware of the power that you have through your beliefs, values, attitudes, and actions to shape the beliefs, values, attitudes, and actions of others? Thank you so much. See you next week.